So the idea with the frontline is just to get a reality check. We hear a lot of theory and we talk to a lot of people who perhaps aren't in that face-to-face environment, and I think it's good to have a reality check and give people the opportunity to talk more directly about what's going on. We have Susan Taylor, CEO of Financial Services Complaints Limited, Jo Tilley, who's Senior Investigator at Commerce Commission, we've got Mark Gosche, CEO of Vaka Tautua, and we've got Teresa Tepania-Ashton, who's CEO of Maori Women's Development Inc. So thank you very much, guys, for coming in today. Now, what I've asked the guys to do is just do a quick 5 minutes at the beginning to set some themes up for us, and then we really are going to throw it open because I'm conscious we've kind of sped through some stuff. We possibly haven't had enough time for people to ask their questions and say what they want to say. So let's make sure in this session we really do get the chance to do that. So Teresa, perhaps we could start with you and go along as you can start with your 5 minutes. It'd be great. Thank you.
I think in relation to the subject of debt, it's an issue that we should all be really concerned of, especially in relation to Elaine's comments earlier. I mean, this nation we are an indebted country, and we're obsessed with debt. So much so that debt has become norm. And one of Elaine's comments that really put a good thud to my system was when she talked about the parallels between, or the outcomes, of Ireland versus Spain. And I talked to her during lunch, and I said, gosh, which one do you think New Zealand is? Because we are obsessed with property, and we're, where do you think we'd be? And I don't want to tell you the answer. All I suggested is that she go straight to Wellington and talk to the Beehive, or because we are in dire straits. And so that's really how I wanted to open it. But also, I'm really want to relate to this gender gap in relation to debt. I'm a baby boomer, and so I grew up with parents who worked their butts off. And they weren't associated to debt in any big way. They were associated to savings. And so, because they took us from the poverty line right through to a nice existence for themselves and us as children, because they knew that the only way to go forward and fulfill their dreams was to associate themselves with good savings. So here's a thought. Why don't we go away from the thought of always concentrating on debt and making that so available to a country that associates themselves with savings? Dr. Pushpa Wood in our session yesterday gave the example of East Timor, where in actual fact they have a national day for savings. Wouldn't that be fantastic? And considering that they have only just started their journey in relation to focusing on financial capability in the last year, what a great way to start to face these issues. Their main priorities are plan, save and protect. Why not as a nation focus on those positive aspects?
Great. Can everybody hear the panellists okay? If you ever can't hear, can someone like wave from the back so we know? Cool.
Your mic.
Mic'd up. Can everybody hear me? I hope so. I'm Susan Taylor. I lead Financial Services Complaints Limited, which is one of the 4 external independent dispute resolution schemes working in the financial services sector. And of our roughly 6,000 or so financial service providers that are participants in our scheme, we have over 260 non-bank lenders, ranging from large finance companies such as Fisher and Paykel Finance, right down to what you'd call your payday lenders, and also peer-to-peer lenders and credit unions. And roughly about 25% of the complaints that we formally investigate result from lending complaints. And what we see from many of those complaints is unfortunately very much a basic lack of financial literacy or capability on the part of the people that have got into problems and have complaints. Often it's a question perhaps of not understanding the documents that they sign, or not understanding the true cost, and by that I mean interest rate and fees of the loan product they're entering into. And if I've got time, I'll just share with you perhaps a very recent case that just came across our desks a few weeks ago. In this case, a more mature lady, I'd say, she was in her 60s, needed to borrow, it was only $175, but she needed the money in a hurry. She saw an advertisement in the paper saying, quick, fast loans, cash in your account today, no credit checks. Everything was done over the phone. The actual interest rate on the $175 was 5%, so only an extra $8 or so because the loan was being paid back in a very quick space of time. What she hadn't fully comprehended was that the person on the other end of the phone, who was essentially selling her the loan, was charging a $200 fee for arranging that $175 loan. So when the documentation arrived in the mail a few days later, she was actually owed over $400 for a $175 loan. And if you work that out in terms of interest rate, I'm not a mathematician, that probably worked out to an interest rate of about 500%. Now, if she had understood the true cost of that loan, then I doubt that she would have borrowed that $175. Now, that's just one example of the types of cases that we see, which, as I said, shows really a lack of basic understanding.
Thanks, Susan. And what I'd like us to do in a minute, actually, is use that as an example of who should have done what. You know, how would you regulate that situation? What could or should she have asked? And where could her opt-out clause or options have been? And should she have asked the question, should the lender have been more regulated and not able to charge that administration fee? Where did things go wrong? So that's a really brilliant frontline example that we can actually talk about in detail. Okay, Mark.
Tolo Falava, Vui Mark Gosche. I'm currently the CEO of Vaka Tautua, which is a Pacific health organisation that deals with people with disabilities, mental health and with the elderly. We're a national organisation. And what we see, and this is very much about stories from the front line, so that's what I want to talk about, with the people coming to us looking for assistance with disability, we're seeing people coming in who are already under severe financial stress and carrying other financial stresses because of their caregiver roles. So last year we looked at what we could do about that, and fortunately with Whānau Ora funding we're now on the road and doing something. But just to give you a little bit of a background, the last census showed Pacific people had a median income of about $19,700 per annum, and the Human Rights Commission put out the figures last week showing you the hourly rates depending on your gender and ethnicity, and that backs up that sort of figure. So think about that, 19,700. The national median is 8,800 more than that. So our target audience, if you like, are starting at a very low level of income. If you're a carer, Infometrics did a survey for carers New Zealand, you're likely to earn 10% less than a person who doesn't have a caregiver role. And you're also likely to be doing about 30 hours a week of caregiver responsibilities. Now, I think that's light in terms of the Pacific community. I'll be leaving here as soon as I finish to go home and care for my wife, and I do 52 hours a week. So I think that there are many in the Pacific community who are doing more, and that, of course, inhibits your ability to do a job or to do a part-time job or earn extra earnings. And I'm a good case in point. 13 years ago, I was earning a cabinet minister's salary. I'm not earning that now. So the realities of being a caregiver do limit your earnings. So low earnings, extra costs. So in our office, we have four of us actually, who have caregiver responsibilities for people with severe disabilities, either currently or in the past, and we have another staff member who is in a wheelchair. And we know the extra costs that are not met by the government. And that could be your transport costs, your medical costs, your prescription costs, equipment, special dietary needs, incontinence products, etc. And on top of that, you're likely to have a higher electricity bill. My water bill is at the highest levels, according to Watercare, of any household that they measure. My power bill at the moment will be about $500 a month, and my washing machine will be going 2 to 3 times a day. So that wears out and breaks down, and my washing powder bill is just astronomical. That's the realities of the people that we deal with. So what are we going to do about it? So we kicked off 2 weeks ago with a financial literacy program for those very families in Maori and Porirua. We have, with the Commission, put together the program, and that will be an 8-week program to begin with, and they are workshop-based, and I listened with interest this morning about workshops alone don't work, and we've learnt those lessons, and each of those families has an individual coach who will come into the home and work with them. What we know will work is based on the stuff we've done with the Commission in Tamaki and the stuff you saw this morning in the warehouse. We bring the whole family together. They have a meal at the workshops. All of the families encouraged to be involved, and 2 weeks in we're seeing some delightful anecdotal stuff already. First week, a woman in Maori came to the workshop. She did her spending diary with our coach, $6,000 a year on cigarettes. The next week she came and showed off the nicotine patch on her shoulder. Think about that from a public health perspective in terms of the added extras you get in doing something like a financial literacy program. We know from the warehouse and from the Tamaki project, and we know it'll happen in this project, that people start looking at what they spend on food. And I remember Clem telling me that one of those families at the warehouse was spending $200 a week on takeaways. They were busy, both parents working, and they started to eat more healthily as a result of just looking at what their spend was. We expect that to happen in our program as well. We have to deal with the cultural realities of Pacific communities, and church giving is one of them. And we have a Tongan family at the moment on our program who gives $2,000 a year to the church. People might say, well, they should just stop doing that. That's not going to happen. It's not the reality. But for adult children, so the elderly couple that are coming to our program have now set up $10 a week direct payments, and they are now deeply relieved that when mum and dad put their hand out for the money, it isn't going to be all in a lump. They will have started to budget for it and pay for it in advance. The typical family that we're dealing with, a family of 6, dad is disabled and mum has respiratory problems. One of the sons has intellectual disability, family of 6. That's the sort of family that we're expecting to deal with. So the realities are that there is a hell of a lot of poverty out there, and if you've got disability, mental health issues in your family, then you're going to be even further down in terms of that poverty level. What we can say is that in the early evidence from our program is that we're going to make that behavioural change that we were speaking about this morning, and it's not just going to be in the way in which people manage their money, it's going to be the way in which they eat, it's going to be the way in which they either smoke or don't smoke, or drink or don't drink. And I heard some really interesting discussions in our first workshop about the men who said, but if I don't drink and I don't smoke, I won't be happy. So I have to be happy, so I've got to keep on drinking and smoking. Well, you should have heard the conversation around the room after that one. So we expect the behavioural change will not just come from those workshops, but the coaching that goes on in the home, and we will follow that up 3 months out with another session to see how it's going. That's my story about what I think the world of financial literacy or capability offers us, and there's some big public policy issues sitting in amongst the evidence that will come out of these sorts of programs.
That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And again, there's some really important points that I'd like us to dive into in there. We talk a lot about whether there's enough coming in, but too much is going out in debt and the wrong things, or whether there's simply not enough coming in, and no matter how well you manage your income, there is just not enough. And with a lot of the work we do, we see both of those. So it'd be good to talk some more about that. Jo?
Okay, thank you. Is my mic working?
I'm not sure.
No.
Can you guys hear Jo? Just say a few things, Jo, and we'll work it out.
Working now?
You might need to
Testing,
hold.
testing. No, okay. Thank you. Okay, that's better. Now? Good, okay. Yeah, I'm Jo Tilley. I'm a senior investigator with the Commerce Commission, and I'm here to talk to you about truck shops.
Excellent.
No, I was just waiting for a response.
Do we have any
Usually
truck
when I
shops in the room?
Yeah. No, usually when I mention truck shops, we get a yay that we're looking at it and a boo, truck shops. Okay, so that's the area that I've been working on for just about 12 months now. Okay, so the Commerce Commission has, we've been working on a project which has been aimed at reviewing the documentation and the business practices of the truck shop industry in New Zealand as a whole. What do I mean by truck shops? It's quite a broad definition, but it's really any company that is mobile and that is predominantly selling household goods on credit through door-to-door sales. Okay, so it's not just the traditional truck shops as we think of it, as the actual trucks with the goods that go door to door. It also includes the the people in cars that go and they sell through catalogues, but they are offering credit. Okay. We have found that the consumers targeted in this industry tend to be of the lower socio-economic areas, okay, and this is a national, more a North Island, that's our findings, that it's more of an issue in North Island than the South Island, but it is in a lot of the lower socio-economic areas. And traders are generally entering into these credit sales, so they are likely to be covered by, this is where I need to read it because I always get my words mixed up, the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act, and the more recently the Fair Trading Act. And I suppose what started this project is that there's been significant changes with both of those legislation, which has given us a few more options in how we can deal with traders like these. So we've kind of used it as an opportunity to gather information to help us to decide how we can encourage compliance within the industry. So we've acknowledged as well that truck shops has been quite predominant in the media, most recently, but also over the last few years, they've been on Fair Go. I'm sure we've all heard of these truck shops. We've acknowledged that at the Commerce Commission that we needed more of an understanding of this industry. So me as an individual, what I have been doing is actually physically visiting these traders. I'm not always making an appointment, I've just turned up. And this is just so that I can actually get to see them in reality. So, I get to see what their warehouses look like. I've been on the trucks for the ones that have got the trucks. I've looked at the literature, and by turning up like that, they don't have time to prepare for my visit, and so I can really get them, on the hop and ask for the information that is readily available. I've had mixed results. Well, no, the results have been good, but I've had mixed responses, I should say. On the whole, they've been compliant, and then there's the odd few that have looked at me quizzically and said, "The Commerce who? Should I know who you are?" When I've said the Triple CFA or the Fair Trading Act, that they've raised their eyebrows and thought, right, we might have a problem here. But at least we're finding all this out. So the other angle of the project has also been that we're trying to increase our advocacy in the area. So we now do have a credit advocate who's been employed just for a similar amount of time that I have. And so I've been accompanying her as well to meetings where I've been able to share my findings and been able to get out with the community and show them that we are out there and we are looking at this industry that they're so worried about. And we've been able to, I've heard along the way, I've heard a lot of what I would say anecdotal stories, and for some of those I've been able to confirm that they are a reality and they're issues that we need to deal with. And I've also been able to find that some of them are just that they are anecdotal. Okay, so it's been good from that respect. So one of the things that I have found about the consumers is that there is a certain amount of choice out there that they do choose. And I don't know, there's groups of the community that may not agree with that. Okay, but what I've found is that there is a certain amount of choice. There are some that do choose truck shops, and this is probably where we need to focus our attention in terms of consumers. Because the things that I've found that are motivating them is that quite often with these truck shops is they're getting these goods immediately or within a very short space of time. And there aren't really, and these people quite often don't have, or at least don't feel that they have any other option. They don't feel that there is anywhere else. They haven't got the ready cash to go into a store, so like the Warehouse or Noel Leeming's. They don't have that cash immediately there to go and purchase the goods at a reasonable or a better price. Okay, so they really feel that it's actually more achievable for them to approach one of these truck shops and pay $10 or $20 a week for those goods. And also the fact with these truck shops is they don't do credit checks. Okay, so they haven't got to worry that someone's going to decline them for the things that they think, that they do need, and in some occasions what they think that they need. So far to date, we've engaged with in excess of 30 traders, and we have provided compliance advice to the majority of those, and we currently have a couple of investigations into traders where it's looking like there will be a prosecution. Okay. So the compliance advice that has been provided to date, it's become twofold. It's a generic round of information which has explained what the changes are, when they're coming in, and how it's going to possibly affect their industry. But it's also been directed to them as individual traders as well. So when I've been going to see these traders, I've been picking up the documents, I've been talking to them, asking them about how they do their business, and so the feedback or the guidance that we've been providing is also directed with their business model and their paperwork in mind. And so now we're at the stage where all the changes are now in effect, and all the traders are aware that I will be coming back round, and again, not necessarily always at a time that's convenient, and they will be required to show me how they've brought themselves up to the current legislation. And they've, in our opinion, as far as we're concerned, they've had plenty of notice of the changes. They've had our guidance, which, like I say, in some of this compliance advice has been very, very thorough. So they really have no excuses, and they all know that, I haven't come in the first time round waving the big stick, but now I will be coming in and possibly hitting them with that big stick. So that's where I'm coming from.
Can we brand that stick?
Yeah.
So it's the last thing they see as it comes towards them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jo. That was brilliant. So it's worth noting that what Jo's talking about is part of a bigger, broader push from the Commerce Commission to engage more actively with South Auckland, other areas of Auckland, and some of this activity that's going on. And I know that we've got John here today from Commerce Commission. I know Lizanne and a few other from the Commerce Commission team are here. So it's a really very proactive push into some of these areas. So Jo, when you go in, do you have to identify yourself as ComCom?
Yeah,
do you guys
I always
do
do. It's no secret.
Do you do any mystery shopping?
Yeah, we do, but I
Yeah.
haven't done it in terms of as
The trucks.
as the trucks. But like, when I turn up, I do go and if they've got trucks, I always just ask. To be honest, they've all been quite compliant, and and I do. As soon as I get there, I say who I am, because it's not any secret. I'm not trying to hide who I am, And yeah, if I see that they've got trucks or that it is a warehouse, I just ask, can I come and have a look? Can I have a look on your truck shop? Show me, you know, and if there's the guys there with the trucks, I'll often get them to, you know, explain. If I'm a customer, I know it's, you know, it's not fully realistic because I'm not really a customer, but I just ask them to go through what they would, you know, how they deal with people. You know, and the fact is, like I say, I've turned up as a surprise, so they haven't been had time to prepare their script as such.
Yeah.
So I've kind of worked within what I've
So
got.
the trucks are a really interesting thing, and we're going to open it up because I'm sure there's a few people here with some views on it. One of the things that struck me when I've spoken to people is they talk about this idea of instant gratification, and it's all very well to sit back and say, why on earth would you step into a truck and pay so much for a bag of nappies or a pair of shoes when you go up the road and get it for a third of the price? But if you don't have a car and you've got 3 or 4 children and you've got to try and stuff them all on a bus in a bad mood to get them to the shops to try and pay for the things that you need, and someone turns up outside your doorstep, the family goes out, you all climb in, it's like in Aladdin's cave of goodness. The kids are excited, everybody gets to choose something, the mood lifts, you all get back in the house and everybody's got something new that they can play with, and suddenly the children are happy, and maybe you get some chocolate biscuits and a bunch of other stuff, and you've got a happy family for at least an hour, which frankly might just be the one thing you needed at that particular moment, and you may have said that you would pay anything to have that moment.
Yeah, and if I can just say something, I've also found it seems to be, it's passed through the generations. Like these truck shops, they're nothing new. They've been around for a long, long time. Like some of the ones that I visited have been around since the 70s, and they've got a very similar customer base to the one that they started out with. You know, and a lot of the business models are that they spend the first few years generating their customers, but then they recycle, you know, those reliable, good paying customers, and they've got generations. You know, they're selling to grandparents, parents, the children, grandchildren. So it's a real generation thing. It's just part of their lifestyle.
There is an excellent photo of a Ministry of Education truck, early childhood education truck, that the Ministry was using, I think is still using. And wherever it would park in South Auckland, 2 of the money trucks would come and park in behind it. And I've got a photo of the ECE truck followed by 2 of the other money trucks behind it. So as the mums came out with their kids to go into the early childhood truck, they would be approached, which can only be described as predatory. And Teresa, I can see that you have something to contribute on that one.
Yes, this is a very hot topic as well. Having been the CEO of Ngāpuhi, I can tell you that the trucks are prominent in low decile rural areas in the north, and obviously quite a problem. Now, of course, we could wait for, I think it's wonderful, I really applaud the work you're doing, but in the groups that we've trained under the Train the Trainers program, we have encouraged the communities to take a stance. In fact, our stance in working within the communities is to work with the lead organisations in those particular areas. So you're talking about areas like Kaikohe, Kaio, Rangitukia, Tiki Tiki, very remote areas. And so we engage conversations with those lead organisations, whether it be the Runanga, whether it be the Whānau Ora Collective, to actually take a community stance. I mean, they take community stances on liquor organisations or liquor outlets. Why not get rid of the trucks? So what I'm trying to say is that we can empower ourselves to make a difference in relation to what we don't want in our communities.
Brilliant. So look, a number of really big themes coming up around personal responsibility, choices, income levels, regulation, and more. Who would like to fire off some questions for the panel?
Can I just add, Diane, that associated with the trucks are what we call the door-to-door salesmen, who actually go door-to-door, again, probably in the lower socioeconomic communities, and sell them household items such as washing machines and TVs at vastly inflated retail prices. And they don't actually get the goods straight away. They have to pay their $20 a week for 26 weeks before they, if they're lucky, receive delivery. And really, again, it comes down to perhaps if those people knew or thought more deeply before entering into the contract, that if I actually saved that money myself for 26 weeks, then I could go down to Harvey Norman or Laurel Leamings and buy it straight out at the normal retail price. So that, again, I guess comes back to basic financial capability training, understanding that sometimes you're better to save and will obviously save yourself money than buying something on hire purchase over at a vastly inflated price.
All right, I'm looking for a sea of hands now. Pushpa. Pushpa, the golden rule, anyone who wants to speak needs to come to the mic. I'm going to be brutal. Brutal.
I'm just interested in Commerce Commission. Are you also looking at, which I've noticed especially in last 18 months or 2 years, the trend on TV advertising where they say, you can try this free for a month at $9.95 at home, and if you're not satisfied, return back for, What is really hooking people up is you try a good speedometer or whatever it is for $9.95 and you're quite pleased with it, and then you find out the price is beyond your reach. Yes, there's a capability issue that I should ask first how much it will cost me before I even get for trial, but there's also a disclosure issue as well. And the same example was which Susan gave us earlier. There's a disclosure issue. That person should have told me that, by the way, along with $175, there's a $200 administration fee involved with that. Yes, as a capability, I should have also asked, is there anything else I need to be paying? So it needs to work both. It's not either or. Both need to actually work together in the same direction, using Melanie's words, collective impact.
Can you pass me the mic, please? Okay. In answer to your first question about those TV ads, I'm unable to answer that question for you today, just because I'm here to talk about truck shops, and that's really what I know about. But I can certainly find out, and I know who you are, so I can let you know about that at a later date.
And then we'll tweet it.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. In relation to the disclosure issue, yeah, you're correct. They should have disclosed that. Maybe I should expand a little bit more on the legislation. So now with the Fair Trading Act, like door-to-door sales now comes under the definition of uninvited direct sales, and within that is also telesales. Okay, so it's a slightly different situation to when someone calls up. But so the disclosure requirements, though, are now relevant in relation to telesales. So if someone just, when you're cooking your dinner and you get that annoying phone call and they try and sell you something, they're under the same requirements for disclosure as if you are signing a contract. Okay, so yeah, it's not quite directly related, but I just thought it'd be a good thing for me to bring up. But yeah, in relation to disclosure of the CCCFA, we can take action, and we intend to be taking action against those companies that don't disclose the total price.
Great, thank you. Do the trucks have to be a member of a dispute resolution scheme?
I know that that's regulated by FMA. But part of my truck shop investigations has been, because I'm aware of the definition for those that need to be with a disputes resolution scheme has broadened. Okay, so part of the information we've been giving out does explain that, and when one of the questions that I've been asking these traders and also checking for myself is whether they are registered or not. If they're not, then I've been passing their details on to the FMA so that they can take.
If they're providing credit, they do.
So if they're providing credit, they do?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. More questions? I can see one straight there. If you guys have got a question, while the last question's going, come up to the mic and be ready at the mic, and then we'll just go to you as soon as we've...
My name is Teresa. I'm work with most of the people that you kind of identify with the door-to-door sales or the trucks. It's a catch-22 really, because when you look at the trucks, they're providing a service. And the service is generated by the people that have no money. Because when you're needing clothes or blankets, or even a TV for your house, which is going to extremes or whiteware, you tend to look at these trucks because they provide those. When you don't have any money whatsoever, and let's face it, it's really hard for the low-income families to get money these days. You know, I know of one person, all she gets is $175 a week, and that pays her rent, pays her power, and her food, nothing for clothing or anything. The trucks, they provide those things. So therefore, it's thriving in South Auckland because of the lack of finances to help these low-income families or people on benefits. The Commerce Commission, I feel, should regulate more when it comes to trucks. There should be more out there for the people to look at, what their rights are in different languages, not just in English. Not everybody speaks English. You know, you need to put it out. And then there should be forms of regulating what they can charge and what people can complain about. Otherwise, we have all sorts of complaints. Some are good, some are not so good. And some, they haven't done anything wrong. That's the trucks. So therefore, it's just lack of information out there for these people. I brought a couple of cases through to Commerce Commission last week, and, you know, I want answers, and so do the people. But it's really lack of income. That has to be addressed before the trucks can even be addressed.
Okay.
They are what help these people.
Thank you. We've got a couple more questions on here, and I can see we have someone over here standing beside a very tall mic.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up on the trucks and draw your attention to a number of clients that I had come in and said, they knocked on the door and said I had $180 credit, so I went on the truck to get some stuff. And then I rang to say, well, can I cancel my payments because I've spent my credit, only to discover, oh, well, no, you misunderstood. You're a good payer. We allow you $500 worth of product. You'd got it down to $320, so we were offering you $180 to bring it back up to $500. So I just wondered if you were aware of that practice, and it is quite extensively used. And so people are spending believing that they have credit to spend.
Right, so it comes back down to the conversation at point of sale. Who understands what? How clear is the conversation? How clear is the terminology? What questions are asked on both sides, and what's the understanding when you go into the agreement? And we talk about an asymmetry of information and of power to some extent. And I know a lot of the conversation around disclosure and the sales practices are based on that asymmetry, which is what you're talking about there. All right, I don't want us to spend the whole session on the trucks.
No, well,
Because I think it's really important, but I think there's a lot more that we can talk about, which is the bigger picture. Did you have another question?
Yes, and it's about the fridges, washing machines and dryers for beneficiaries, that there is an agreement between Work and Income and Fisher and Paykel, and these things can be made available to beneficiaries at about half the cost as they'd be available in the shop, and to paying off a Work and Income advance is the best way to go. There's no interest, it's a small amount per week, and should there be anyone who is not aware of that, please be aware that
That's
is
great, thank
an
you. So you're saying there's alternatives.
Yep.
Mark, did you want to respond? Jo, I'm conscious we've been getting you to talk a lot.
I know this always happens.
Mark, did you want to respond to some of those points?
Look, I'm involved in the current work which I see as a preventative side. And I'm also aware of the probably people in the room who do the cleaning up the mess side, which is the budgeting services. And there's a big question there, is that for years and years and years and years, governments have spent money on budgeting services. And when you're a budgeting service, they pay you so little that you can't actually solve the problem. You're just cleaning up the crisis, only to see the people go back into crisis. And then they come back again further down the track when the government department sends them there. Now, I don't know what the total spend on budgeting services is, but it wouldn't be insignificant. It's not enough, and all the budgeting services will tell you that. But why isn't the spend going into the prevention? The Housing New Zealand people, now MSD, are going to say to people, you're now paying a market rent, go out into the private sector. Now, to pay a market rent in Housing New Zealand, you're not high income. But you're going to have to foot it in the private sector, where the market at the moment is just extreme in terms of supply and cost. Are those people going to get financial literacy training before they're turfed out of Housing New Zealand? That's the sort of stuff that we need to be thinking about, is spend on the crisis stuff, yes, but trucks will be there forever unless people have got the knowledge to tell them to go away. And I'm watching conversations on Facebook at the moment about the extreme pressure that those people put on the doorstep, and people don't know how to get rid of them, so they sign up. They get them onto direct debits, and they get them into the position where they do actually have money in the bank, if you like, so they come back knocking on your door saying, oh, you've got some money you can spend. We've been keeping a direct debit going beyond after you paid for all the product we sold you. Now, how are we going to fix that just by regulation? We're not. We have to do the education, the stuff that we're trying to do with the hardest families that you'll find in New Zealand are the ones that we're now trying to work with, those families who are caring for people with disabilities who are Pacific and Maori, and at the very lowest end of the income spectrum.
Thank you, Mark. Teresa, you've got...
I was just going to say that really at the end of the day, budgeting is a tool of many other solutions that need to occur. And when we train our facilitators, generally we've engaged facilitators who are already part of whānau order collectives, so who are already tending to the holistic solution in relation to the needs of whānau. And budgeting is one of many tools that is a requirement to enable them and empower them to get back on the road and fulfil their own independent and individual dreams. And so from my perspective, or from our perspective, it's very much, really we need to collaborate more to bring more services through one lens. And really at the end of the day, as essential as budgeting is, I really do hope that there's a wraparound service for everything else as well.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions that are sitting there that I'm reading and I don't know the answer to. Do trucks operate outside the tax system? I should assume not. They should be paying tax like anybody else, presumably if they're a registered business.
So do they operate outside? No, they're not. They're legal.
They're a legal
businesses.
entity. They pay tax like
They're
anybody
registered
else.
as companies.
I wonder if they pay as much tax as they should.
Yeah, well, I do attend I think it's a quarterly. We have like an Auckland fraud group, and Inland Revenue are in attendance of that. So, I
So the
share
IRD,
the information. They know who I'm talking about. It's hard to get information out of Inland Revenue for those who are here from Inland Revenue, but I certainly feed that information through. So it's
There's another question. What about the impact of bigger long-term loans? Now, whoever asked that, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by the bigger long-term loans. I'm open to... All right, Sheila.
We're talking a lot about the little payday loans and the truck ones, which are $200. What about the impact of your $5,000, $10,000 loans, which you're going to be getting from the bank or RTFI for G and like that?
So Sheila's just...
Missing the big picture here.
Yeah, Sheila's just asking about those bigger loans, the 10, 20k loans, probably the car loans, from maybe third, fourth tier lenders with interest rates of 28% or 32% and big admin fees on the way in. Sounding like a loaded comment there, but anyway. what's the view on some of those bigger long-term loans?
Yeah, well, I think we wanted to do a home ownership scheme for Pacific people in Tamaki because of what's happening there. And we thought we'd be able to find some families that might be able to get into home ownership. We've worked with the New Zealand Housing Foundation and they have a very good entry into affordable housing. We couldn't find any Pacific families in Tamaki or in Mangere that could enter into that sort of scheme because their level of debt could be 30 or 40,000. And that's not atypical, that is typical. If you talk to all the budgeting services out in South Auckland, they're getting people presenting with 30 to 40 to 50,000 of debt, not just the loan to the truck. So you're not going to get into home ownership and get a loan from the bank when you're carrying that much debt. So you've got to get people out of debt before they've got a chance of even saving, let alone getting into home ownership. It's a huge, huge problem in those poorer communities.
And we've also got a question, what about middle income debt, which holds people back too? And by that middle income debt, we'd be talking about high mortgage debt, I assume, and other personal lending, credit cards, etc., etc. Again, I'm not sure if the person who asked that question wanted to give any more detail on that. So look, I'm conscious that there's probably a lot of different people in the room who work in different environments and have different trains of thought on some of these issues, and I know we're not going to get anywhere close to cracking them. There's this big sort of debate that goes on about whether there is enough coming in, but actually it's debt that prevents people from having enough, or whether there's just not enough coming in. Arguably, there's always going to be both groups. There really is. I know from some of the work we do that there are times when there is enough coming in, but a series of historical decisions are keeping people down because of the debt they've signed up to. I also know that sometimes some of the obligations are difficult for people, and we had a wonderful woman we're working with at the Women's Refuge who got herself straight after months and months and months of very hard work, found a home, got her budget sorted, had food in the fridge, paying the bills on time, and then the family descended and she just was unable to pay for the additional 4 or 5 people who had joined the situation. And she went straight back to where she'd been the year before. And that's heartbreaking. And I think there is a complex mix there of capability and circumstance. And none of us in this room probably have the answer to that one. I think we could just take a tiny bit more time, actually. So I'm just wondering where to take it now. We've got these themes of instant gratification, which is something, Susan, I know you talk about a little bit in some of your things, and need, and whose responsibility goes where. And then Mark, you talk very realistically about the day-to-day and what happens for people. Susan, you've sometimes came in and scared the life out of me with some of the stories you tell of people who sign up for personal guarantees. Can you just talk about that for a minute?
Yes, well, there's one story that probably is one of the saddest cases that's ever come across our desks, where a lady working as a cleaner in a rest home was persuaded, or probably more likely coerced, into signing a guarantee for the son of one of her fellow employees. Now, the mother couldn't give a guarantee herself because she had a bad credit rating. The son wanted to buy a new car and needed a guarantor because he was only aged about 20. And this rather vulnerable lady was coerced into signing a guarantee. She didn't receive any independent advice whatsoever. As far as we know, the document was brought to her at her workplace and she was told to sign here. You can probably guess what happened. A few months later, the son crashed the car, was written off, he disappeared, and of course the lender came knocking on the door of the guarantor. And as it transpired, she was left with a $15,000 debt to pay, which of course she'd had absolutely no benefit from whatsoever. Unfortunately, because the guarantee had been entered into quite some years ago by the time we got the complaint, which was before our jurisdictional start date, before the time that we could start looking at complaints, we couldn't look into the circumstances surrounding the signing of the guarantee. I wish we had, because the facts as they were explained to us came very close, I think, to duress or undue influence. All we could look at by the time we got to it was talking to the lender and seeing if they were prepared to negotiate a debt repayment program that she could realistically afford, because she was a very low income earner. So she's probably going to be left paying off that debt for the rest of her working life, and it's very, very sad because, as I've said, she received no personal benefit whatsoever from that loan.
But Susan, couldn't she have gone into a no asset procedure bankruptcy?
Yes, she could have. In fact, she was under the care of a budget advisor who recommended that, but for particular cultural reasons, her brothers would not let her enter into a no asset procedure because it was seen as bringing shame on the family. So, yeah.
And I know that I think Clem was working with someone who signed a PG for, I think it was a colleague whose son bought a 26 grand car, wrote it off and took off to Australia. There's a few people in New Zealand who are paying the bill on that one. Why he needed a 26 grand car is beyond me. But the theme that comes out a lot with this actually is often it's women who are signing the personal guarantees, and sometimes under some pressure, and then left paying the bill. What's interesting is they often do painstakingly pay off these ridiculous loans. And what would be fantastic would be if mainstream lenders could get a sense of that. If they could see through a positive credit reporting environment people paying down $26,000 at some ridiculous interest rate that actually gets paid off, because that would give them access to lower interest rate mainstream credit, which I think would be a really positive thing. What I'm just going to get the panel to do is just give a really short wrap-up, and you can just choose wherever it is you want to take it, guys, because I'm conscious we've touched on some things, and I'd just like you to have the opportunity to give a final thought. And Jo, we'll start that way and come down here this time.
Yeah, so I've been listening to what everybody's been saying, and so I think it's probably just important that for this moment I just let everyone know that as of the 6th of June, the lender, I'll have to get this in the right order as well, lender responsibility principles have come into play. So that gives us at the Commerce Commission a lot more tools to deal with circumstances like that. So now lenders are required to make inquiries in relation to someone's affordability, and that also includes guarantors. Okay, so if someone does end up getting signed up as a guarantor and we investigate it, and there's potentially been a breach of that, then we can take civil action. Okay, so it doesn't help people from before the 6th of June, I know that, but the changes have come in, and we are proactively out there. And again, with the truck shops, that is one of the things over the next 12 months, now that it's come in, I'm proactively going to be going out there and putting the traders on the spot to know exactly what they're doing, the questions they're asking. And it's not just a case of them ticking boxes, oh yeah, we checked some bank statements. They actually need to prove to me that, to the Commission, I'll get a bit personal about it, but they need to prove...
You did say you're going to beat them with a stick earlier. It can't get much more personal than that.
Yeah, so I've taken a bit of ownership over this one, so yeah, apologies. So there is a lot more that we can do now, and also under the lender responsibility principles, there is the consideration of oppression as well. So we have got a lot more that we can deal with now. It used to be that we were limited to the documents, the documentation, but now we can assign resources to deal with the conduct and the behaviour of these traders, and that's certainly what we're intending to do. Okay, and also just very quickly is the unfair contract terms. So just to discuss some of the things that have been brought up with the ongoing debiting. Okay, that's one of the terms in contracts we've identified as ones that we're likely to take to court to see if we can get recognised as unfair contracts to try and get those removed. Okay, and also just one final thing, we also have are able to give our infringement notices in relation to disclosure. So if we find documents and they are not clearly disclosing the total price, which seems to be, you know, it's one of the issues that keeps getting brought up, then we can issue an infringement notice, and that's $1,000 per offence.
Jo,
Okay.
can I just to close,
Yeah.
can I just ask you, if people are seeing things they think you should know about, well, how should they tell you?
So we've, on our website, so www.concom.gov.nz, there is our a complaints link there, so you can make a complaint.
Can you do that anonymously, or do you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah. And also, I mean, you know who I am now. I don't really want an influx. But yeah, I am.
perhaps we could have your home number.
Yeah, my cell phone.
Ring
I know.
after the hours of service.
But I know there's certain people in the room here who've already been in direct contact with me directly, and I'm happy to discuss these things.
Right.
You know, because like I say, there has been a lot of intelligence gathering as well. So any traders that you think that I might not know about,
Let them
I
know.
need to know about it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. Mark.
I want to thank Elaine. I heard the presentation on most of it this morning, just to reinforce the sort of things that internationally you're finding works. Financial capability, and I've become a bit of a zealot and a real enthusiast for it over the last few years, and everybody thinks, oh God, how boring.
We don't.
It ain't. We use social media a lot. Why? Because Pacific people are the biggest users of social media in New Zealand. So Facebook is big for us. If you want to see what our program looks like and see what fun looks like, then have a look at our Facebook page. Our first week we were competing with the karaoke going on in the other part of the hall. You know, there's a war between us, but it was pretty loud. And our group came along on the second week with their own musical instruments, and they started off singing and dancing. And the kids all come, they have a feed, and the kids are saying that Mum and Dad's got a spending diary. Where's ours? So this is a family event. It's fun. They have food, and at the second workshop, they didn't want to go home. So if you think financial capability is boring, have a look at our Facebook page over the next few weeks, and you'll see.
What should we look for on Facebook?
It's just Vaka Tautua.
Vaka Tautua. Brilliant.
So it is fun, and it can be made fun,
Well-
but more importantly, it can make a huge difference
We'll
to
tweet
those
that as
families'
well.
lives. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Susan.
Yes, well, I'd just like to say that people often view complaints in a very negative light, but I want to say that there are a lot of positives from complaints as well. I mean, we rely obviously on people coming forward with their complaints, and we encourage them to do so, and we try to make the process as easy as possible for both sides concerned. And from those complaints, we can learn lessons. If we see a widespread problem, it's something that we can pass on to the regulator, and we can work with our scheme participants to improve behaviours. So we suspect that we are often only seeing the tip of the iceberg of some of the issues and complaints out there, and we really do encourage people to come forward, because it's only by coming forward and speaking out and letting us have a look at what's gone wrong that something can be done about it, if appropriate redress can be obtained, and more importantly, we can learn lessons which we can feed back to communities, regulators, to improve behaviour.
Right. Thank you. And Teresa.
So I thought I should probably end by at least telling you what Māori Women's Development do. And so we're actually a last resort funder assisting Māori women and their families to set up businesses. Last resort because we only assist with funding if they've been declined by banks, which means we take on a lot of risk in areas where there's a lot of development that needs to occur. And I can assure you that it's affordable lending, only at 5%. But really the key thing for us is to really give them the right tools so that they are successful in their business, or that they have a good go at it. Because often if your business does not work, that's a greater learning tool as well. And so we equip them with as much learning tools as that they can acquire prior to actually being funded by us. And sadly, the majority of our businesses fail due to the inability of being able to manage their finances, hence why we're heavily involved in building financial capability. And on a second note, I'm also part of the partner working group for He Kaikaikuringa, looking at financial literacy and savings for Māori. I'd like to thank Diane for allowing us to run the session yesterday morning. It was fantastic to see everyone attend, and the only message we'd have is that if you have any delivery stories that you would like to share with us for Māori, please make an appointment with Zella to come and talk to us, or if you would like assistance, please talk to Zella as well in relation to how we can empower you to work amongst Māori.
That's
Kia ora.
brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great segue to our next video. I think is that Viola?
Yeah.
We have a last-minute intervention.
I'm asking a question, as you say, if they need help. I do save few Maori mortgage sales. However, it's a difficult matter when they got not enough money. When I got in touch with a whānau, and which they say they all the same situation, I like to take your name because we specialise mortgage sales.
Right.
And if I do come another one, and if I can't find any whānau help out,
We're
then
going
I'll tap you on
we're going to
you.
connect you up as soon as Teresa steps off the stage. Brilliant. I just want to thank the panel for today, for the discussion, for their candid conversation. I've been doing